we had Natalie for all of 2 seconds and then she left.
Oh, no.
Oh,
well.
She's back. There she is. Okay, we have her. Yes.
Oh,
Hi.
hey.
Hello. Wow, you two actually look like Jason.
Dude.
So the people on my channel will be familiar with your brother Jason because we have a Bible study every Wednesday. And Jason is an incredibly special guy. So when he mentioned that the two of you have this, it's called the Yaqar Project. I put the link in the description and in the chat. And I read some about it, but honestly, it sounds like a huge project that would be run by like Red Cross. And I hear that two of Jason's sisters run it. And so I want to hear all about it. But before we start, I have to ask you guys about this. So this is the bingo card we use for our Hebrew Bible study.
Okay.
And if you look at on the left, third one down, is Jason questions if he is even a Christian. So I have to ask the authorities, is Jason actually a Christian? Because he doesn't seem to think that he often doubts it. So you have to tell me.
Hard to tell. I feel like that's definitely whatever's happening inside of his brain. I would say from what I know from our conversations, he would still technically be a Christian, just like teetering on the edge of universalist. So I don't know.
Yeah, he's a bit of a universalist. I try to like nudge him out of that, but you know, honestly, like I have a tender spot in my heart for universalists because, I mean, it's a nice. Yeah, I would also like to think nobody goes to hell, but there are some people I would like to think are going to hell.
That's fair.
So, Jessica, Natalie, please tell us about yourselves. Tell us about the Yaqar Project. Take it wherever you want to take it because this sounds so exciting and such a nice thing you're doing.
Well, we appreciate that. We're really excited about it. You know, it's pretty new, so we're growing, but we're really hopeful. You know, that it's going to grow into something bigger. Like, because I think that, I mean, that's the mindset that we had starting out with it was that. It wasn't intended to be our project or our thing. And a lot of times I have people say, oh, you know, like, this is Jessica's project or this is Jessica and Natalie's project or whatever. But really, that wasn't the heart of what it was supposed to be. And that's not what we see it being going forward. We see it as a collaboration. So, yeah, we're really excited to be here because connecting with you and with other people, that's what we need to be doing. So we're really grateful for the opportunity. Natalie,
so first of all, I read you're an architect.
I am an architect, yes.
You are an architect. When I was in college, we referred to the School of Architecture as the School of Architorture. Mm-hmm. And it was... And I remember that it was the only building on campus that had cots and showers for the students.
Yeah, we had that also, yes. And people slept in the architecture building a lot. Yeah.
Because you had all these projects you had to be building in the studio, and like the architecture students would be... I was living on campus, and one of my friends would sleep in the architecture building. And I'm like, it's 5 minutes away. You can't. And he's like, it's just different. It's just different. Yeah. I'm in the studio.
Yeah, that's it. I think the longest I was ever there was like from a Tuesday at like 5 a.m. to a Saturday. So,
Wow.
but that's fine.
Oof.
Made it. And, it's kind of provided me things I didn't know it would provide me. I went into it actually because I went on a mission trip to Panama, and I and after I went on a mission, like my next mission trip, I really felt like I wanted to do something to help the orphans of the world. So I knew I was headed that direction, and I thought I wanted a practical skill set for that. But also on my first mission trip, I was in Panama, and that was the first experience I really had, like being in a totally different culture, living a totally different way, going down and we were doing building projects, but we were doing the building projects we were doing were great. But then we went from those building projects that we put up to a village out in the jungle. And I was really struck by the different lifestyle and how they lived in the huts and how they needed like so much surveillance of the property so they could see predators coming. And so I was really struck by, I really fell in love with understanding culture. And I think you can still do that here. Like with my architecture business, I work with restaurants or homes, and every restaurant has sort of its own culture, and every house sort of has its own culture. But the thing that it's provided me that I've appreciated most is that I'm a sole proprietor and I run the business out of my home. And, this past year I think I've been to three countries earlier this year, and I can travel and do it. I can work at 3 a.m. if I need to. So,
Well, you're also married and you have kids.
I do. I have 3 kids. 2 are biological. So I had my oldest daughter, and then 2 years later, we had our youngest child, and then we adopted from Ukraine. And our son Josiah is right in the middle of the 2. So right now they're 7, 8, and 9.
7, 8, and 9. So you're just Wonder Woman. She's an architect.
What I am.
She's an international charity worker. Yeah. I guess your parents only had saints as kids, apparently. So Natalie, you have big shoes. I hear you studied film.
Yeah, I did.
And so I'm guessing you're going to be the next Steven Spielberg.
No, I studied film, and it was much easier than architecture. It just felt like I was doing group projects for like my entire time at school. And I honestly mostly wrote. I did a lot of script writing when I was in school. And then it wasn't until my last like year in college that I started doing wedding videos. And then talked with Jessica about like wanting to do more things with traveling and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how we like segued into this idea, because I wanted to do something more documentary and more like purposeful with film. I like, this is really, the Yaqar Project is all I really do with film at this point. I do a little bit of wedding videos here and there still, but mostly this is like my main focus with video. And then now I'm back in school, and I'm going back to school for somatic counseling, which is totally different. But
somatic counseling, is that like physical therapy?
It's more like trauma-based counseling, where like you hold trauma in specific parts of your body. So there's like a lot of like EMDR and brain spotting and things like that people use. I don't know that much about it yet because I just started in January, but yeah. So
what made you decide to go into somatic therapy?
I decided that I wanted to work more relationally after I left college, and I was like, I mean, neither Jessica or I make any money from this. And so I was working for my dad because it was super flexible. And so I was just working remote all the time, and I was getting really tired of not spending any time with anyone and not having coworkers anymore. And so then my mom suggested that I become a life coach. And then I was like, I don't think I want to be a life coach. And then I kind of fell into this job where I started working with teen boys. And it's like a short-term residential facility, and I loved it. And now I just moved last month, and now I'm working with preteen girls, which is very different.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just started really liking it, and so now I am doing that.
So, well, Connie is from Australia, and she says, somatic, wow, trauma work. I see deep and profound runs in the family. And I have to agree. And Nathan, who's from here in California, says, a beautiful website and project. I agree. So tell us about the project. Like, how did this start? What made you call it by a Hebrew name that I'm the only one here, I believe, who speaks Hebrew. So, like,
I don't. We started. I think we first started conceptualizing it, I think, in 2017. My husband and I went and adopted our son in Ukraine. We were over there for like 6 weeks. And when we came back, even before we brought him home, we immediately contacted Natalie because I knew her heart and the videography she was doing and wanting to do something impactful with it. And so we contacted her because while we were over there, Micah and I, we were talking to people about how did you get into adoption, what brought you here to Ukraine. Ukraine's a bit of a hard place to adopt from because it's a fast adoption. It took us 9 months from start to having him home, so it was really fast. But it's a blind adoption. So you go over and there's no child matched to you. There's no guarantee of who you're bringing home. You just go. And we had a lot of heart connections over there. So we went because we believed we were supposed to go there. But then we met so many other families. So we were asking, how did you get here? Why are you here? In Ukraine, a lot of the families had seen some random photo or they had a friend there previously who had seen a child. And, we just really started to understand, I think almost everyone who comes to adoption comes because of some kind of connection. We know so many people who come to it because they hosted kids. Some people come to it because they saw a photo of a child. Or for me, it was working with children over there before, knowing those stories. And so, I think like David Platt said that, orphans are so much easier to ignore before you see their faces. And they're so much easier to ignore before you know their names. And so, of course, I had gone into architecture with this idea that it would be helpful. And really the way it's been helpful is just with the flexibility it's provided me. But when we were over there, it's like that Steve Jobs quote about the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. So when we came back, we were immediately like, let's talk to Natalie because there's so many kids in the world that are so vulnerable and no one's ever going to hear their story and no one's ever going to know who they are because they sort of get lost in this system. And, whether they're growing up in an orphanage or shuffling foster homes or whatever, and a lot of overseas places are still institutionalized. Yeah. Then they just get out and they're on their own and then they're back into crime or whatever they need to do to survive. And then they perpetuate the cycle. And so we felt like, well, what Natalie's studying, what she has in her skill set is so valuable. And I do think still we've gone to Honduras and to Greece this year so far. And I still think some of the most valuable people on our teams are the storytellers because those are the people who connect you to everybody else, and whether it's a photographer, a videographer, or a blogger, those are the people who open these doors of connection. So we started then, I think in 2017, me and Natalie, and honestly, we just talked for 2 years, really.
Yeah.
We'd get together and what does this look like? And you have architecture and I have photography and or videography and what's the correlation? What is this? All we have is that we want to do something. And in those 2 years, we were really quiet about it. Every time we met, I was like, let's not tell people we're working on this. And in retrospect, though, I've thought about it and I think that was really a good thing for us, because if we had said then, like, we want to do this thing, people would have rallied behind us. And I think really we didn't have the right vision then, and we didn't have the right direction, and we would have messed it up. I think.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So what are you doing? What does Yaqar do?
So the idea behind Yaqar is that it's a collaboration of people who are willing to help orphans. Because I feel like we all know the scripture of James 1:27 that says, you know, this is true and undefiled religion, is to be of service to orphans. But I feel that there's so many denominations of churches right now, and people are so isolated in their denominations. I feel like people in certain churches just want to serve people associated with those churches, and it's just and we're just isolated as people. We're just running in our lanes, and we wanted to be that coming together point. Like, we know that the Bible says that two are better than one, because they'll have a greater reward for their toil. So why not come together and take this on? And so that's what we are, is that point of collaboration. And I think it's such a good time to be doing it, because there have been like traditional missionaries. It would be like, you have to raise your funds, you have to go abroad, you have to establish something, and that's your sphere of influence. And what we're trying to create is a place where anyone can connect with those missionaries all over the place. And it's a great time to be doing that because of the resources we have. Like, I feel like I think that outreach to orphans has to start changing with the abilities that we have now. Like, now we can network across the world. Now, if you want to raise funds for a project that I've told you about, I can get those funds across the world in a day. And when I started going on mission trips when I was like 15, it was like everybody put less than $10,000 in an envelope and stuff it in your bag, and like we're going to get the money over, but like,
yeah,
it was just so different. And I think that's so, like, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, and I know a lot of people who are like, this is too much and too overwhelming. But I also feel like we have resources now that we didn't have before, and we have this chance and this ability to create a place where it's just like where we can unite everyone for like a single goal of helping orphan children.
I think, can I add on also?
Please, yes.
I think, like, in a really tangible sense, like, we're just like a hub. So we're trying to eliminate what most people know the issue with like missions work can be, where like people come over and they change the culture, and or they come over and they spend, what we did a lot of times was we would go and we'd have like a week in an orphanage in Ukraine, and then we'd leave, and then they'd probably never hear from us again. And so it was just this very weird like savior mentality thing that I think that I don't think they were intentionally doing it, but I think a lot of missions groups did that growing up to provide opportunity for us to do missions trips, but really we weren't genuinely helping these people. So like, basically we're just the hub. There's all these people who are just planted there, and they're going to be there all day, every day for like however long their ministry lasts. And then there's all of us who want to get involved. And so this is just like, Yaqar is just the central location where it's like, if you want to get involved, you just go to our website and you can like pick any form to get involved, and know that like it's going to these people who are on the ground all day, every day. So
how aware are you two of this little corner and what Jason is doing in this little corner? Like, does he talk to you guys about it at all?
like as in his podcast?
So this little corner is what we're calling it. Is how I ended up like having 9 people right now listening to what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started my YouTube channel, I honestly thought that in 200 years, so if you see my first video, I am going through Genesis 1 letter by letter in Hebrew. It's a 5-hour long video, letter by letter in Hebrew. And what I would do is I would go over the meaning of each letter very clearly, so you didn't have to watch the whole thing. If you wanted to go like Genesis 1:4, you wanted to know what that word means, you could come to my video and listen. And I thought, okay, nobody's ever going to watch any of my videos. In 200 years, someone's going to decide, I need to know what this letter in Genesis 1:4 is, and I'm going to find Jacob's video, and that would be my contribution to the internet. Little did I know that that video now has thousands of watch hours. Why anybody? But so this little corner kind of flowed out of, you guys have heard of Jordan Peterson?
Mm-hmm.
So the Jordan Peterson addressing the Bible. So a lot of us, there's a lot of channels on YouTube and other places that are discussing the Bible and psychology and culture, and like it depends which channel you go to. The different channels have different focuses. One of the big names is, for example, Jonathan Pageau, and he's an Eastern Orthodox icon carver, and he talks about art and culture and the Bible and all that stuff. And not the reason I'm telling you all of this stuff, the person who's like the focal point of our little corner of this little corner is Paul Vanderklay. And he is a CRC, Christian Reformed Church pastor. And he was a missionary in the Dominican Republic, I want to say for something for like 10 years. And I also have a background in nonprofit work. And like, I remember talking to him about these trips you would have of bringing Americans to, for example, the Dominican Republic or anywhere else. And so the reason you do those trips is not because of any of the work that they actually do. It's kind of like tourism, but after someone does a trip like that and they see how people are living, that's what gets them to actually contribute money and fund the missions. And because until you actually see, so I came to the United States from Iran. And I remember when we first came to the United States, which was before either one of you was born, that I walked into Ralph's supermarket. I guess you guys have Kroger's in Tennessee.
We do.
Right. So Ralph's is what Kroger's gets called around here. And we walked in. And I remember going into the produce department and seeing how clean the oranges and the apples were, and like just the sea of oranges and apples and all kinds of fruits, and they were all like sparkly and perfect and the right size. And it was, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, what is this place? Right? Because when you live in Los Angeles like I do, and I think frankly anywhere in the United States, and you compare to some place that's even, I have to say, even when I go to Europe, it's not the same as the United States. But certainly when you go to some place that's considered a third world country, these undeveloped places, and you see how people live, as far as the plumbing goes, as far as all of the things that we here take for granted, it really touches you. And it really helps you understand, like, have gratitude for how great we have it. And so
Yeah.
The film element just sounds like you're doing that work in a way that just wasn't possible before.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I do agree with what you're saying, that short-term missions does have a place and a real value in that it connects people with the heart of a vision. I think what we're wanting to do with the hub is that when you go, and we run trips frequently, but you're serving with a group that then with the kids afterwards, like you're serving alongside a long-term group. And what we're trying to be really is sort of like an Angie's List hub, but for orphan care. We stay orphan centric, but our like on our website, there's on the front page an ask button. So anybody that we've connected with, that we've vetted, that our board has approved, and we have partners now in India, Ukraine, Honduras, Greece, and soon America. And then we're looking at probably Uganda next year. But we go and we meet those people, and then they go on our website and they click on the ask button and they say, hey, I need a mechanic, or hey, we need to put a roof on this building. And maybe sometimes it's volunteer based. And we do ask that that opportunity is available because, like you're saying, it's so important for people to connect. Like if someone, I'm sure they could hire a mechanic over there, but if they want to put on our website, we need a mechanic, and someone here is like, let me go. And then once they go, they're connected to that organization. They're connected to those children. And on the flip side of the organization, like we're trying to be that resource so that they can come and say, this is what I need. And then we also are developing like a lot of ways, because we know some people can't travel or some people aren't comfortable traveling. And so,
Which is
yeah, go ahead.
That is a big benefit of incorporating film, because every time we do go to meet these people, like that is the initial thing that we do, is like Jason and I will film like everything, and Jessica will take a bunch of photos, and like we talk to them and vet them and all of that. But then we come back and then we make a video, and then people who want to go can watch who these people are and like learn about them before they even have to like step on a plane, or they don't have to go and they can just decide for themselves. Yeah. Sorry, Jess. I totally
That's okay. I was just going to say, what we're trying to provide is that unique direct connection. Like my daughter is a real crafter and she makes things all the time. Last winter, like she knew that one of our partners wanted to put on a Christmas party in Ukraine for like the kids that he works with there. They're social orphans whose parents are abusive. And so it's called Project Joy, and he just wants to bring a childhood to the children. So he wanted to put on a Christmas party, and they needed a certain amount of funds. So she made homemade ornaments and sold them, and that money went directly there. And so it's that ability to get to a place where you can say, this touches my heart, or this project speaks to me. This is what I want to plug into, and being that connection point to get people there. So, and that's what I mean by like, it's not meant to be a mission. Like it's not our mission. It's really like, we need people. Like it's just supposed to be a place where people come and it's your connection point. Like, of course there's people posting things and running things and organizing things, but really what it's about is you connecting with them, with these organizations that are working on the ground. Yeah. And I do think what a cool time to be able to do that, because I just think, 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. Like this wasn't a possibility that we had. And as many maybe struggles as social media and stuff have brought, there's also this incredible ability to share information and to be on YouTube channels like this and things we didn't have before, to spread the word and unite us. Yeah.
I have so many questions. How has the war in Ukraine been affecting your work?
I mean, when it first hit, it hit hard. I feel like we had some game plans for the year because we try to like fund a big project every year. That was like what our initial goal was, to do something like that. And so the first year we built a school in India, and then that year that the war started, we were like, we're going to save money and we're going to help Project Joy buy a building. And then like a week later, like we went and we were going to get it approved by the board. And then by the
Made
time
a video.
do what?
Made a video.
Made a video, yeah. And then by the time we got to our board meeting, we were like, well, probably can't do that. And yeah, it like, I think it pretty heavily affected it at first, but then it just kind of shifted what we were doing. And so instead of raising money for a building, we started raising money for like medical supplies and for like gas for transportation. Because Taras, who's over there, who runs Project Joy, was driving people to the border to get them to safety because he was like in the hub of what was happening, and getting medical supplies to people, raising money for food for families that couldn't afford it and things like that. Because a lot of families just couldn't leave because they just had nowhere else to go, and everything that they had was, they didn't want to leave it behind.
Yeah.
Do you want to add more? Sorry.
Oh no, I was just thinking, it was just, I think that it was nice though to have that direct. I mean, it's not nice that the war is happening, obviously. My son's family's over there, but it was nice to have that direct access to someone and be able to provide that direct feedback to someone. Like we had somebody donate $5,000. $5,000 was enough to take 100 people to safety. Like he was just running people across the border. And then we can send photos of like, here's the faces of the people that you got out of this country. And I think that was really an incredible thing for me, just having the connections I do over there, to have like a direct resource where we knew where the money was going, how it was being used, and we were seeing like that back on a daily basis.
Yeah, and the feedback we were getting from people who were donating was like, I'm donating to you because I know that you know this person that's there. Like it just felt like such a direct connection for them, even though it was coming through us. They like trusted us that we were giving it right where it needed to go, and we were,
No, that is so incredibly important. I mean, this is one of the things that really, when you work in the nonprofit industry, that there are so many times when the money's going, like I've seen nonprofits that half the money goes to fundraisers, right? And that's actually not so uncommon, that they raise $5 million and $2 million of that is going to the people who are raising money. And it's like, really? I mean, is that what we want to do? But you guys obviously are just, I just love this so much. I want to ask you though. So you said your son's family is in Ukraine. What is that like? Adopting a child who has family in another country, and I'm just wondering what that experience has been like for you.
It was a blindside for us when we went, because we had a really good team over there. Our Ukrainian team was a really good team, but the documentation in Ukraine, it's like a little all over the place. Like I could show you 3 medical documents we got for him, and all 3 state different things, different diagnosis. And so it's just not the best. But when we went there, we were told he had no siblings, because in Ukraine you have to adopt sibling groups unless you have a special waiver from a judge. So siblings have to be adopted in groups. So there were several children we kind of self-eliminated from, because we had limited the number of kids we were going to adopt, I think, to like 2 at the most. And we were really hoping for 1. But when we met him, And we had actually thought we were going to adopt a baby, but when we met him, he was 3. So you go over to Ukraine, and all of our paperwork had been approved beforehand. We did a home study here. We got through immigration here. And then we sent the whole dossier over to Ukraine, and they called us over. They gave us a date to come over. And then they have 3 ring binders full of children. And you just go through them and you pick a child you want to meet. And for our son, he was 3. The most recent picture of him was like he was 11 months old. So we had no idea really what he looked like. We didn't know how he was doing. There were several children in the book that we were like, the diagnosis was bad, but you don't know, what they actually are doing and how they're doing. So anyway, but we chose to meet him, and we went down. He actually is from Ismail, so it's down, like you kind of cross the Moldova border to get to it. Almost like if you're driving, it's most direct. If you cross the Moldova border, it's like you know how Florida has that panhandle and you don't know why it's part of Florida. It's like that. It's like is it part of Ukraine? I don't know. So it is, but it's been a safe place, thankfully, for his family, because it's no value right now. It's just like over off to the side. And so there hasn't been any bombings or anything there, which has been really good. The most thing that they've struggled with has been that they have no food and no supplies like that. So, but when we met him, we stayed in his hometown for 5 weeks, and we visited him twice a day at the orphanage. And we had like a visitation room. We'd go sit there. We really didn't interact with the staff. They didn't speak English. Our lawyer took us there initially, and then they left us at an apartment, which was really nice. And then they would call it every day. We would text them, and they would call us a taxi who would take us there and then bring us back. And on the day that we were going to court, so we went through like 4 weeks, 5 weeks of being there, and then we got our court date, and we got up to go to court. It was me and my husband and our 2 daughters. And on the drive to court, our lawyer said to us, "Hey, we found out this morning he has this whole biological family here. He has a grandmother, and he has a grandfather, and he has aunts and uncles and cousins here in town. And the grandmother has actually been visiting him, twice a month since he was a baby." Wow. And that was very hard, because we were like driving to court, and I was freaking out. Like, I don't want to take this child from his culture and his family. I don't know. It was hard, and we were in this panic. The lawyer was kind of like, just do it. Like, just keep going. He needs a family. And so we went to the courthouse, and it was like it was just a little courthouse with a porta potty out back kind of thing, like the little shack. And we went in, and there was like the judge and 3 people, and they went through the court proceedings, and they granted us the adoption. And then there's a 10-day, it was 10 days, now it's 30 days, but there was a 10-day waiting period before you could take custody. And my youngest daughter was sick somehow, maybe with a cold, but anytime we got a little bit of a fever, a little bit of a cold, the orphanage wouldn't let us in, because it spreads so fast in a home of like 300 children, so we understood that. But anyway, we couldn't go back and visit him, so we decided to go visit his grandmother. And she met us on the side of the road. She was the only family member we met that day. But my husband stepped out of the car, and he's blonde and blue-eyed, and he looks very much like my son. And when he stepped out of the car, she just started crying and crying, and she hugged us and said, like, I've been praying for a family to find him. I've been praying for this. So I think it was very hard for her to, have that separation. It's been hard, I think. But we've tried to be as diligent as we can. We don't share a language. I don't speak Ukrainian, and she doesn't speak any English. She spoke to us that first day through a translator. We went back in 2021, I think. 2021. Yeah. We went back in 2021 to make some connections for the Yaqar Project in Ukraine, and we went to that town and we visited with her for several days. Our team had dinner with her, and we had translators with us then, so we got to talk some then. We bought her like a smartphone so we can, I guess an iPhone, so we can FaceTime with her.
Oh.
But we can't speak to her, so but she'll call and the kids will show her things. And we're friends on Facebook, and she messages all the time saying, when will we come? But I don't know. It's a tough time with the war. But they are very self-sustaining over there. His family doesn't have a lot of money, and I think it's a one-room house. Is that right? I think it's one bedroom, and
Yeah.
then a living room and a dining room. And then the outhouse is outside, but it's his grandfather and grandmother and aunt and 2 cousins live there. But they've turned, it's a very small house, and the entire rest of the yard is garden. It's like walnut trees. She gardens all the time. She goes out biking to get mushrooms. So they've had enough food, and they do everything with firewood. So they've had what they needed. But I think that's been the biggest concern. And there was a lot of stuff with the war where really the only way we could get people money was through online banking systems. So we could send money to like and even that was kind of complicated for a while because like different Western Union was limiting the amount of money, and there were various things, but now it's a lot smoother. But when my husband and I tried to send her money, she's just older and she doesn't bank online and she doesn't have a check card, and so you can't get her any resources. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
been fun trying to keep in touch, but I know I need to learn the language because
Well, I mean, it's, learning that's not easy. And I believe, I mean, I don't know about Ukrainian, but Russian's a pretty difficult language to learn.
Natalie tried to learn that.
Yeah, you have to learn a whole new alphabet, but they're pretty similar, Russian and Ukrainian. I think they just have certain words that are different that they use, but they are very similar from what I gathered.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's kind of like Hebrew and Arabic in that they're kind of separate. It's easy to learn both, but they're like the same language family, I guess, kind of like Italian and Spanish, that type of thing. And I speak Spanish, so I kind of understand Italian, but I couldn't really speak it to you, you know? But so this is just really fascinating, and I know there's a lot of issues around adoption, and it's a major area of concern because people want to help, right? And at the same time, exactly what you were saying about, I don't want to take people away from their culture, but yeah, I mean, I can imagine being a grandmother in Ukraine who, has this grandchild that you may have a very difficult time taking care of yourself, and you would be very happy for the opportunity for your grandson to live in the United States and in a place of safety and all the bounty that God has blessed us with.
And I think I think it's just, to me, it comes down to parents being intentional about preserving the child's culture. I don't think that you have to share the culture. I don't think that's necessary in adoption. I know a lot of people do, but I think that, and I know a lot of countries, like for instance in Ukraine, the only children adoptable under 5 are special needs children. So our son was on the special needs list because Ukraine considers that he's unlikely to be adopted by a family in Ukraine. He's less likely. So those children who are more likely to be adopted, they're not available for international adoption so early. But I just feel like culture is important and identity is important, but I feel like hope is more important. And I think my initial reaction when I heard my son had biological and family in town was like, I'm taking him away from a situation I'm not sure can be better for him. You know, like I don't want to, I don't know. I don't know what the scales look like. But the fact is, like, he was in an institution and there turned out to be a wild amount of abuse in that institution. Like 2 years later, we found out that there's just a ton of horrible abuse happening. And then it's like, yeah, I think the child and the safety and the hope is more important than the cultural ties. And you try to create that in your home with the food that you eat and with the community that you create for your child.
So Natalie, you have to hop off. I want
I
to give
do.
you a chance
Sorry.
to say all of the things that you need to say.
I mean, I don't know. I guess around the Yaqar Project, all I can say is that like Jessica is doing a killer job of taking like full reins pretty much. Like this past year, I have been focusing on going back to school. And so Jess has been killing it. And yeah, like I really encourage people to get involved in like join a trip. And if anyone wants to join me in filming, like I would love to like help people learn how to edit if they don't know how to, or to like come on a project with me and film with me. And it would be super helpful to have more hands on that kind of thing just for the trips I can't go on, you know? So yeah, I guess I would just say that. And thank you for having me on here. I'm sorry I have to leave so early.
I am glad for whatever time you can give me. You're always welcome back. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. And I am guessing you are going to get people jumping on that because there's a lot of people interested in video and editing and stuff in this little corner.
That's awesome.
Perfect. Yeah. I would love that. So
okay.
Thanks.
So it's the little red button on the bottom.
All right.
So yeah.
So okay, so you decided, so you've been on mission trips and you decided you wanted to do the Yaqar Project, which would help give more permanent help to people with orphans. How did you go about that? Like, how did you go about establishing the connections, deciding which projects, getting board together?
Oh yeah. Well, I took 2020 was the year of documentation for us. Like it was a rough year for travel, of course, and we didn't travel at all in 2020. And so that was the year we obtained our 501c3 and we hired a lawyer and we, he donated his time and that was amazing. And we gathered our board during that time. And so, yeah, what did you ask?
Well, I'm asking how you went about setting things up and like
Sure.
What kind of structure do you have for like what does it take for a project to be a project of yours? What kind of how'd you make your connections?
So our first connection we made through Jason actually, and not because he had the connection. It was 2019. So like we started, me and Natalie, talking in 2017. And like I said, we kept it like so quiet. And I really do believe that was God's direction in hindsight, looking back, because I think my family has rallied around us so well. And the community of people that we have rallied around us just out of love for me and Natalie and whoever's involved. And so I really feel like if somebody had tried to rally around us in 2017, it wouldn't have been, anything. And so when my son came home, he came home in 2017. Really, we discovered evidence of a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma really early on. My husband was also dealing with like a new diagnosis and couldn't work, like was having trouble at work. He has like clinical OCD, but it was affecting a lot of his workplace. And then we got the diagnosis, and I think that was a little hard on him, but he was struggling with like really severe depression, like, suicidal thoughts, and he was struggling to get out of bed. And really 2019 was the worst year of my life. I'm pretty sure it was really hard. And I had the 3 kids at home, but the one was really struggling. And my 2 daughters were 4 and 2, and they were being very affected. And then my husband, he was struggling to get out of bed every day. And so, and I was suddenly the sole breadwinner. And I was just not making things work well, I think. And so it was a really tough year, and kind of ironic that this really took off that year. But that year, my brother, he had a dog he was really close to, and he had not been traveling and not going anywhere because of that bond, and his dog passed away. And at some point we met up at like a Chick-fil-A because he knew I was struggling, and I was like, I just need out of the I just need to go somewhere. So we put the kids in a play place in the Chick-fil-A, and Jason and I sat down to talk, and he said, like, I'm feeling like I need to go. I just feel this need to go, and I'm just ready to buy a one-way plane ticket and go somewhere, but I have no direction, and I don't know what I want to do. And just as an opportunity to relate to him, he was the first person besides Natalie and my husband that I'd ever talked to about wanting to start some sort of project. I said, like, I understand the frustration because I know what I want to do. And since the time I was like 15 years old, I knew like this was I wanted to work with orphans. Like this was the goal. And so I had made all these decisions in my life, like in marriage, in my planning of my life, like in every step with like, okay, I know that I'm going here. And is this taking me away from that calling, or am I headed that way? And so I told him, I just feel, I feel that like the same but opposite frustration of like, I know what I feel like I need to be doing, but I can't go anywhere. Like I'm stuck. I can't travel. I can't do anything with this idea that we have. And so I told him, and he called me like a day later and said, listen, I feel like I need to go to India, and I want to go, like, I want to be the feet of the project right now. I want to take the Yaqar Project and I want to start it, and I want to go to India. And I said, I don't know anyone in India. I know people in Ukraine. I don't know anybody in India. And he said, well, I really like, I'm open, but I really feel like this is where God said to go. I feel like I need to go to India. And so, my parents were calling me, Jason, he was very anxious to leave. And my mom would be like, you got to find him someplace to go. So I was looking, and I was praying, and like, God just put me in the right places, like show me the right people. I had someone I met at a gymnastics center who had just come back from adopting in India and said, listen, you should touch base with this organization. They're doing all this good work. So I reached out to them. And then I was still looking for other contacts. And I found really randomly on a website this tiny picture of a couple and a brief description of like, we have this home for children in India. And so I messaged them, and I didn't hear back for about like 10 days. And then they sent a message saying, hey, we were on the verge of shutting down our stuff. And we just told God, hey, like, if you want us to keep this foster home open, if you want us to keep like this ministry open, we have to have help. And so then they said, please come. And so Jason went, and Natalie went on the first trip, and they took 2 friends with them. And So on that trip, we didn't have a board at the time. We were just like, we're just starting this out of the blue because Jason had this, Jason was ready. And we hadn't known. We'd been stuck and we didn't know what to do. And actually, right before they left, I felt like I had some clarity that we'd been trying to have for 2 years. Natalie and I had been trying to have this discussion of like, how does this even make sense? Like, I think that the reason that it didn't make sense is because our focus was on us. Like, the videography and the photography is so important and the storytelling is so important, but it's not everything, right? Like, Yaqar to us means that everybody has value. Like, everybody has something of great importance in them that is just theirs. And so it doesn't have to be video or photography. And I had architecture, and we were looking at us, and we were saying, like, well, how does architecture relate to photography? What are we going to start that we can in any way present to people? Like, hey, if you're an artist or a photographer, like, I don't know, we couldn't figure it out. And I think that right before they left, I had this like clarity, and I called Natalie and said, let's sit down at a cafe. And so we sat down, and when we sat down, she said, here, I have something I want to talk to you about. And it turned out we'd both received we both had the same understanding come to us, is that, well, we don't need to be focused on us. What we need to be is a place where anybody can be of value, like we just need to be that coming together place where Jason, whatever he has to offer, can be of value. He took a friend over there who is just so great with kids, like went over there, made the kids laugh. The videos were incredible because the kids were having fun, and that was his role on the trip. And we just kind of finally had that clarity right before Jason left that, well, this is the reason it wasn't clicking into place. This is the reason we didn't need to be sharing it, because we didn't understand that it shouldn't be about us. Like, it's not about us. We're not considering ourselves missionaries. Like, this should be like God's project, and we will steward it and we'll support it, but like, let people come in. Like, it should be about that collaboration of people who care and people who just want to make a difference. So we started that way, and now we go. So our system now is that we go on a first trip, and it's usually staff and photographers and videographers, which have generally been Jason and Natalie. We did have a photographer come with us on a volunteer trip who contributed beautiful photos, and that was so nice as well. But our first trip is usually just our kind of core staff, because we don't really know what the conditions are going to be like, and our flights sometimes get messed up, and we learn a lot on the first trip of how the trip could function. And we just pick a hotel that we think maybe this would be okay, and sometimes it's really not. And then we're like, well, we're not bringing volunteers back here. But we go and then we meet with groups in person. We always meet in person, and we meet at their location so that we can see how things are. We try to ask a lot of questions. Jason will do sometimes interviews. We'll get video and photo as much as they'll allow, because of course with kids there's sensitivities, so we can't always, for instance, our partner in Greece, we have no photos or videos of, and we never will because of the security purposes. But we go and we meet with them, and then we come back and we make a presentation to the board. Like, here's our concerns. Here's, what we think is great about this project. And also, here's how we think volunteers could plug in. Like, these are the things volunteers would be useful to them doing. And then the board just discusses whether it seems like a good connection. And when we wrote our bylaws, we established like, okay, these 3 verses are, and we're not, so our project is not solely a Christian project. Like we work with people who are not Christians. We're open to anybody. Like we don't want there to be any limit to how people come together to help these kids. But we are Christian founded, and we're really open about that. And with our board, we're open about like, these are the 3 main verses that we want you to evaluate. Like the first is, of course, James 1:27. Are we actually working with orphaned children? Because it's really hard when you get on the mission field. Like there's so much information all of the time, and there's so much need all of the time. And when people hear that you're there and you're trying to help, then they bring a lot of different things. And I want to help everyone, as does Jason. So it's good to have a board who's willing, like who said, let's stay orphan centric. Like that was our goal. That was our purpose. So like in order to become this hub for orphan care, let's not muddy the waters. So that's good. But we do work with social orphans too. So like kids who aren't legally orphans, but are not cared for by their parents or are in very abusive situations or something like that. So that was the first criteria, like let's stay orphan focused. The second was Jeremiah 29:11. Like let's make sure that the groups that we're working with are like working to provide a future and a hope. Like that's what God said he was going to give us. So let's make sure that that's what these groups are doing. Like whether they're Christian, whether they're not Christian, they should be working to provide hope for these kids and to provide a better future. And the last one is Proverbs 3:27 that says, don't withhold anything good when it can be freely given. And that is another one of our criteria. Like, of course, you can't always constructively give children everything that comes in as a donation, but let's make sure that there's nothing being withheld by the staff or by the, that there's nothing being done weird with the money and the donations and the time that we're giving. And then our board will evaluate, and we consider that remains a little bit flexible, but like people get approved. But then of course, if a volunteer organization goes and is like, hey, this is not what like we take feedback from every volunteer trip, and the board gets regular updates. They're going to be, we've established they're going to be getting at least yearly updates on every partner of like what the volunteer trip looked like this year, what we learned new about the partner. But we have not had any trouble with our partners. We try to vet them a lot, of course, ahead of time, because traveling to Africa is not the cheapest. So we don't the trip until we vetted them. But anyway.
So how many partners do you have?
We have right now 2 in India. One's called the Grace Kennett Foundation, and it's completely self-sufficient, but they're really eager for volunteers. And then there's one called Home of Hope, which is up in the northern part of India. And it is sort of a ministry to about 100 kids who are impoverished, like living in a village that's very impoverished, and they have a lot of trouble with like alcoholism and stuff. And so they've built a school there. In Greece, we have one. We work with the Home Project, who works with unaccompanied refugee children. And then in Ukraine, we have 3. And then in Honduras, we have 2 organizations we work with. One's like foster villages, which is really cool. They have a policy of Honduran kids being healed by Honduran families or raised by Honduran families. So they create these villages for those families. And then we work with a girls' home for trafficked girls. So, yeah. And then we're connecting in America this year. So right now we have about 3 organizations that I'm writing up reports for the board to look at. And that'll be that for this year. But once people go on a volunteer trip, so we have the first trip to connect with people, and then the board approves them. And then we're releasing trips every September 1st. So I contacted every person we work with on July 1st and said, what do you need? Like, what would a volunteer team look like for you? What could they do for you? When would be a good time to come? And everybody let me know what they were looking for. And then I'm reaching out to our trip leaders. And after someone goes on a volunteer trip, if they want to lead a trip themselves, we have that program that we've established where trip leaders trip costs are covered so that they can go and take a group of people again. And so it's building that way, and that's great. This year, I think we had 2 trips to Honduras and 1 to Greece, and then we'll have 2 to India in December. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's going. But Jason's leading one of the ones to India in December, so that's fun. And I think my husband may be going. So yeah, it's good. It's moving. It's sometimes slow and sometimes discouraging and sometimes really exciting. So it's roller
Well,
coaster.
you're an absolute Wonder Woman. I mean, I have to say, in Hebrew we say kol hakavod. All of the, I don't even know how to translate kavod.
Is it like a Renaissance person?
Well, literal no, kol hakavod means
Okay.
literally all of the glory. But
Okay.
you're doing all of you. You deserve all of the praise because there is. I mean, this sounds like a lot of difficult stuff. When you were talking, I was reminded of a story I read in a book that I've been talking to Jason about similar things. So it there's this there are 3 men who are traveling, and they decide to camp out um, at night next to a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And a dog comes and urinates on one of them, and he's like, oh, and he goes down to a stream to wash himself off, and the wall falls on the other people,
Okay.
right? And so this book, it gave this as a story of, sometimes we think we don't know what God's plans are, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think something something happens to us, and we're like, oh, this, like, why would something like this happen? I remember a couple of weeks ago, for our Bible study. Jason really likes our Bible studies, and I love having him at our Bible studies. But sometimes he has to work,
Mm-hmm.
and he was really upset. He's like, "Oh, I don't want to miss this," and I said to him, so the word that usually gets translated as carpenter apparently should actually be stonemason. So Jesus was a stonemason.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And like, that's real backbreaking work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, back then, it's just hard work breaking stones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so lots and lots of day laborers were breaking stones to, like, make these roads and make these. And I said to him, there's some stone somewhere in Israel in one of these Roman roads that somebody walks on every day and doesn't realize. Jesus, like, spent a day breaking that stone to put it there for a reason, And so, like, when you're making that pizza, make pizza like Jesus would make pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God has decided for some reason that he would rather have you at Pizza Hut on this Wednesday night instead of our Bible study. And when it's, like you said, when it's not about you, it's not about,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's okay, there's work that needs to be done, and for some reason God has given me this capability, and this is what needs to be done.
Mhm.
And I do my part, and God does the rest. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn that over the years, because it used to be I used to be a lot more like, oh, no, I need to do it this way, or I need to be doing this. And it goes so much better when you just you kind of leave that part, and it's like, okay, what do I need to be doing right now that God wants me to be doing?
Mhm.
And it really sounds like that's the type of mentality you've gone into this with. And um, I'm not at all surprised that it seems to be so blessed. I mean, it really sounds like you have wind filling your sails.
I hope so. Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe that it's moving forward, and opportunities like this. It's just so nice. It's so nice to connect with you guys, and Jason talks about you all the time, and so, but it's having those people like come in and be part of it, because that's what it is to me. Is like, I feel of myself like, what a blessing to be part of the Yaqar Project, and I understand that like I technically helped found it with Natalie, but it didn't ever feel like that to me. And I think what a blessing that it did start in 2019. Like I was so sad to not be on that first trip, but it was such a good representation to me that like that confirmation of, okay, that isn't what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be about you. It's supposed to be about these children, like these orphans, and the coming together and that working together of the body of Christ, coming together for like with one purpose and one mind to take care of this thing that we were asked to take care of. And to start in 2019 when I couldn't travel, when I couldn't be a part of it, it was, later, like a year or two later, I was thinking, what a cool thing actually that it did start that way, that it didn't start with me at the helm, because I'd never want people to see me at the helm. One time Natalie asked me like something about like, what word do you want? What word would you hope people would describe you with? And I just thought, I just want to be like invisible, you just want to be like, you just want people to look at what you're doing and think like, okay, just think of God, like just be that reflectance back to him. You don't want people looking at you because people look at you and there's always flaws and there's always issues, and maybe I'm trying to juggle architecture and this job, and I'm losing patience with my kids, or I'm dropping the ball on something. Like, we only have so much capacity as human beings, but God fills all those gaps. So I just feel like the less there is of you and the more there is of God, that's the ideal. And I think that that's what I hope the Yaqar Project is. I hope it's just like that anybody who hears about it thinks like, okay, like I'm going to be part of this. Not I'm going to volunteer for this organization, but like, yes, I'm going to be part of this organization. And that's what we tried to do. Like, we actually just redid our website, and that was the main focus, was like, when someone comes to the website, we want these 4 really apparent things, like go, so you can get on a trip and go be part of this, stay, so that you don't have to go anywhere. Like, you can use your gifts right where you're at. You can quilt, or someone made a table for us to auction off. You can do things right where you're at to make an impact. We have a button for giving, like if you just want to get on there and see what projects people around the world are asking for, and pick one, and like you could adopt a project, I'll fundraise for it, to plug in that way, or to be part of the community that's on the ground and be able to come on there and say like, well, I need to ask for help. And that was our main focus with that, because I do think that's the key. And I think that when we lack that sort of unity and the idea of working together. And when we start looking at people, when we start saying like, oh, this person's mission, this person's project, then we kind of like, miss the point. And of course, I know that that there's a scripture saying like, support the people. Oh, what is the scripture? I'll think of that in a minute. But I know that you're supposed to support the people who are going out, and through that you become workers alongside of them. But what we want with the project is like, let it be yours. Just come on there and say, yes, I want to be a part, and here's how I'm going to be a part, and not for people to be looking at us, my parents were hosting a Bible study at their house a little while after we started it, probably in 2022 or 2021. And someone was sort of teaching on the parable of the workers in the field. And I just remember thinking as they were telling this story that I know that the parable is a lot talking about how everyone has the same reward no matter when you come into the field. But I also,
right, yes, I know.
yeah, I think it's in Matthew. But I also loved this part that God kept, or that the master kept going back out. That like he clearly he hired people to work in the field at the break of dawn. But then he went out again at the 6th hour, and he went out again at the 9th hour, and he went out again at the 12th hour to bring people in. Because when God has a mission, like he was bringing all these people together, and they were all rewarded the same because they were all valuable. They were all as valuable, And so I really fell in love with that parable in a new way. This idea of like, okay, but if you're in this laboring, if you feel like, okay, God's put on my heart to work with orphans, but it's not my project. It's his project. It's his field. And, maybe I'm one of the first ones laboring, but hopefully he's going out and bringing in, more and more people, because it's not going to get done without that kind of collaboration and that unity. So
we have 14 people watching, and I've taken up over an hour of your time.
okay.
I want to give the people, if they want to put questions in the chat, a chance to ask you some questions. Chezi has joined us. He's our man in Jerusalem, and a popular guy around here. He says good evening. And Garth from Minnesota obviously hasn't been paying attention, because we've been talking about Yaqar this whole time. Yaqar is the project that Jessica and Natalie, who are Jason's sisters, have founded to help bring together people who want to help orphans with projects in, you said, Greece, Honduras, India, Ukraine, and now in the United States.
That's right, yeah.
And helping orphans. And this, I mean, honestly, this has been an incredibly humbling experience for me. Yeah, Garth just got here. This has been an incredibly humbling experience, because honestly, I think I've also kind of wanted to help since, and I've done like nothing even close to comparable to the amount of work you've done. And but honestly, I think what you've done, which is most important, is make it possible for other people to get involved. And that's the biggest thing that I think is missing. I think a lot of people, and especially in this low corner, they want to help, but they don't know how to help. And a lot of times when you're trying to help, you don't know if you're actually helping either, right? And so the fact that we know Jason, and he knows you, and you have been establishing these long-term connections with these places all over the world that are actually helping children. um, you are creating opportunities for everyone to really work together, which is absolutely beautiful. What do your parents think? Like, how did they raise three wonderful children like this?
Well, we're four. Yeah, we're
There's
four kids.
four of you. How
Yeah.
did they raise four wonderful? Well,
Um,
now you have to tell me what the wonderful things I believe it's a
well,
sister, right?
yeah, it's
Yes.
Melissa. She's actually on our board. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
she's awesome. She's a really talented musician. Her husband's a musician. She's been playing the violin since she was like 4, I think.
Oh wow.
She's traveled all over America leading worship, and yeah, and now she's here in Cleveland, Tennessee, which is so nice for me because she had her son about a year and a half ago, and he's my kid's first real I mean, the first cousins. You
Cousin,
know, my
yeah.
dad's one of 8, so I have a lot of extended family. But yeah, it's nice having her around, and she's so involved. You know, like our family has been very involved. My parents show up to everything, and donate, and they're on trips. My mom went to India. Natalie led the trip to India, but Jason was on it. My mom went with us. My dad was with us in Honduras in March, pouring concrete and doing electrical wiring. And so they're really, I think they're,
They
excited.
sound like wonderful people. I mean, I as Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them.
Yeah.
And it seems like it. They've raised four kids who are so committed to living a Christian life. I mean, it's just I am knowing Jason. I expected his sisters to be wonderful people, but yeah, I'm absolutely overwhelmed with
Thank
the
you.
beauty of this, and the your way of looking at it, because that's another thing I talk about a lot on my channel is, you know um, it's up to God. So I kind of have been thinking about this analogy, right? It's kind of like we're driving a car, but have we don't have control of how fast the car is going,
Hmm.
because God has control of how fast the car is going.
Yeah.
We only have the ability to try to steer towards God and towards what He wants, and He decides how far we get, and where we. I mean, ultimately, all we get to decide is if we want to do that which God wants us to do. And it really sounds like in Hebrew it's called bitul. It's called nullification of the self. That um, you decide that God is the one who's in charge, and you recognize that and give yourself into that. And it's honestly a beautiful thing. How did you decide on the name Yaqar?
Um, well, it was Natalie's idea to use a Hebrew word
Okay.
because we wanted, we sort of fell into the word Yaqar, the first word that we came up with. But again, back in 2017, when we didn't really understand the full vision of the project, we had come up with the word Zakar. That's a
Okay.
Hebrew word as well. Because Natalie had said, like, listen, we're Christian founded. Let's use a Hebrew word. Let's be unique, like when
Mm-hmm.
people look for us, let them be able to find us pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly. Um, Turned out that the word Zakar, which I think means to like remember with purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so
It
originally,
also means male.
yes. So turned out that wasn't a good
Yeah, yeah. It's so.
So in
Believe it
some
or not,
countries, it
yeah.
means male in a way that didn't seem appropriate for work with children.
So it's funny. Biblical Hebrew only has about 3,000 different words.
Oh,
Yeah, it's pretty small number of words, and so there's a lot of, and this is something when I tell Christians, a lot of them are surprised. So the Bible is filled with puns. I'm not
right.
even joking. Like almost on every page, there's a pun here or a pun there, and it's like
Yeah.
it's actually, yes, some of them are like really funny puns, right? But you can't translate puns from one language to the other. But part of that is because words have double meanings
Sure.
in Hebrew. But Yaqar, that's precious. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when we came up with this word, it sort of served this dual purpose, is that like the children of the world should know that they're precious, right? Like they should have, and I feel like that's what gives children hope, knowing that like someone values them and someone considers them. And maybe it gives us all hope, really, to know that somebody sees some worth in us. And so that was one side of it. And the other side was like that we hear so often people say, "Oh, that's really cool. I wish I could help." Or I wish I could do something about this crisis. Or, "Oh, well, you see these pictures of kids online. I wish I wish I had something to offer." And we just feel like everybody has something to offer. Like you have something, I feel like, uniquely in you, some gift that probably nobody else in the world has. So you have something to offer, and whatever it is, we wanted to be that place where that offering became like life impacting, where that whatever your precious and important thing of great worth is that you carry inside you becomes the thing that makes these children feel like they're of great worth. And the way that happens is through this sort of building of this bridge, of the Yaqar Project being the bridge between you through our partnering organizations directly to a child who needs to know that they're valuable.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I don't want to keep you too long, and people in the chat aren't asking questions. So tell me, what would you like to add? Where is there anything you want to know about my Bible study with Jason? Do you love this picture that Karen?
I can't see this picture.
Oh,
I saw your cat walking around.
So this is the Valley of the Shadow of Death, because my
Okay.
cat's name is Shadow of Death.
No. That seems appropriate for a cat, but
a black cat. Yeah.
Yes.
So I got a black cat so I could name her Shadow of Death.
Okay.
Let me pull up. I have this picture. I have this picture. Where is it? Okay, let me pull it up. So this is.
Oh.
So Karen, who has her own channel, she's an artist. She has a channel called The Meaning Code, and she's one of the people in this little corner of the internet. And so it's called. First called it Pharaoh's Daughter, but later she realized it could also be Moses's mother at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's
right.
True. Yeah.
And I think it could also be Miriam, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and like there's that tree in the background, which for me at least, it's reminiscent of the burning bush,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was so we're working in this little corner to so we're also going through the 501c3 thing that you're doing, that you did, and we're working to start a new foundation. And since I got to name it, I decided, hey, if I get to name it, I'm going to name it Em Habanim Smecha, which it translates to English as the joyful mother of children. It's from Psalms.
Yeah.
And when in Judaism, the mother, so we also refer to God as our mother. So the verse is Ha'ofchid Akeret Habayit Em Habanim Smecha Hallelujah. He who turns the barren woman to a joyful mother of children, hallelujah. And it's from the Hallel, which is a song of praise that's said on festive days in Judaism. And so the children of the joyful mother is the fruits of the Holy Spirit of God, right? And when I told Karen about the organization, she decided to donate this image to the foundation.
Oh my gosh.
And which was really special for me because Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh who found Moses, plays a special role on this page of this Talmudic discussion that's been very important in what we're doing here. So I just started crying. And so this image, like I got a huge printout of it and put it up on my wall, and it's the background on my cell phone now.
Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
And I gave a copy of it to a friend of mine who is this is funny because I don't believe in female ordination, but my friend is the rabbi of a synagogue I go to. She's a friend of mine. So what can I do? And I gave her this as a copy. What you're doing is just, I love it. I really do, because what I keep on telling a lot of people, especially in this corner, is, so Paul Vanderklay is kind of like the leader here. And I tell them, I don't want it to be that if God forbid tomorrow or even 50 years from now, Paul has a heart attack, that all of the work that we've put into making this a community just falls apart. Right?
Yeah.
And, it's a lot more difficult to create a foundation like you did, which has a board, which has the structure. But when you do that, it has the capacity. I mean, I don't need to tell you, you're an architect. I've been making this analogy a lot to people. I said, you know what? A single person can build a house church, but a single person can't build a cathedral. If you want to build a cathedral, it has to be a group effort, right? Yeah. And you can't just have a bunch of individual people making their own small churches and then turn that into a cathedral. That doesn't work. You have to lay the foundations for it, right?
Yeah.
And you seem to be really doing that.
I hope so, because I really agree with what you're saying. Like, if for any reason, like, I wasn't here, or for instance, Natalie, who's been our CEO since it founded and is now pursuing another degree, and she's still very involved, but like, hasn't had a lot of bandwidth this last year. Like you shouldn't have, to be reliant on one person is not a good system. And I think you do see a lot of that. And it's not like I belong to a denominational church. I belong to an Assembly of God church, but I think it's difficult sometimes seeing that separation of sometimes those organizations have been built so centrally focused. And I understand part of that is about community and connection. And like we can give to these places because we trust the connection that we have there. And it's about that relationship. And I think that that's good. And those sort of structures have given those abilities to have these relationships that people just innately trust. Like if they're part of my organization, I can serve there, give my money there because I know that I'm part of that organization and they're part of that organization. But I think that really makes a bit of a lack in us as Christians. Like, does it matter if our philosophies are a little different? You know, we're in this, like when we come together to serve, to make a difference. I mean, of course, it matters what the truth is, right? And we have to have those discussions and we have to be open with each other and holding each other accountable. But but when we come together to serve and to be the light of the world and to be the salt of the earth, we should do it in unity, I think, because I think that separation is really a deficit to us. And especially in this age when everybody is communicating across the world, like we should be a united body.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
I would love to hear more about your Wednesday night Bible studies. We don't have to do that here. I know you need to wrap up and it's almost midnight here.
It's getting late. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
it works out good though because my kids are asleep when you call. So yeah.
Okay, so I am going to end this broadcast, so we can let you